ghouls and ghouls, and welcome to a very special Halloween special. It's that time of year again. As the days grow short, a chill wind shakes the dead leaves from the trees, and the world itself takes on an air of strangeness as the veil between the living and the dead stretches thin. In honor of this wonderful time of the year, we're taking a look at
We're taking a look at two offerings from that 60s empire that once was Warren Publishing. That's right, Creepy Magazine and Vampirella. Full disclosure, if I have barely any knowledge of comic books or its history, I no doubt have even less knowledge when it comes to horror comics and horror magazines. Despite being on a podcast a number of years ago with some friends called Read More Horror Comics, where we read and reviewed, I think, the first 14 issues of Creepy Magazine, my buddy Casey was the main man with all the knowledge, otherwise the rest of us would have been utterly lost. If you've been watching for a while, I shouldn't have to explain my lack of knowledge. It's the shtick of this channel. Anyway, James Warren began his publishing empire with works such as Famous Monsters of Filmland and Monster World, which were both edited by Forrest J. Ackerman, or Uncle Forey. Those paintings are incredible. If you don't know Forrest J. Ackerman, it's a damn shame. He worked as a literary agent representing the likes of my personal favorite, Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, I always mess it up. A.E. Van Vogt, and Kurt Siodmak. I don't know. He coined the term sci-fi, and if I had to draw some kind of parallel to him, I'd call him the equivalent of Stan Lee as a kind of spokesperson for horror and science fiction. At one point, he had an extremely large collection of science fiction, fantasy, and horror film memorabilia, and I had heard that before he died, they were trying to get his Los Feliz home, at which he would give tours to fans, turned into a local museum. Sadly, that didn't happen. Oh, and Vampirella, he was also a co-creator of that, which will be more important in a bit. I became aware of all of this thanks to my father, who used to read all this stuff and has been a lifelong fan of the weird world of horror and sci-fi, which thankfully he mostly passed on to his son. He was the type of kid you hear most horror directors talking about being. The kind that bought Famous Monsters and ordered all the plastic monster model kits in the back. The kind that had this 6-foot-tall Frankenstein poster on their door. Honestly, lately I kind of wish I had this poster. There is no way my wife would let me hang something up like that, though. No doubt I'd hear a half-dazed scream in the middle of the night when she forgot I was there and thought someone was in the house. This is the reason I'm not allowed to have a life-size mannequin Jedi Luke Skywalker. Maybe I should draw my own poster and get it printed. Oh well. In 1964, Warren began publishing horror comic stories in creepy and eerie. Because of the magazine format, Warren did not have to adhere to the comics code of the day. Surely you know the comics code. Even if you're as poorly versed in this stuff as I am. The Comics Code Authority formed in 1954 after Senate hearings around the publication of Frederick Wertham's book, Seduction of the Innocent. There's always at least one trying to ruin everything for everyone else, isn't there? Though I feel like in current day we're surrounded by a bunch of armchair Frederick Werthams tweeting out and trying to make everyone else as miserable and lonely as they are, except in an extreme liberal fashion. Oh, how the pendulum swings. The Comics Code put the squash on everything fun. Like what, you may ask? This code banned graphic depictions of violence and gore in crime and horror comics, as well as the sexual innuendo of what aficionados refer to as good girl art. What the hell is good girl art? Let's see. Cover illustration depicting an attractive young women, usually in skimpy or form-fitting clothing, designed for erotic stimulation. The term does not apply to the morality of the good girl, who is often a gun mole, tough cookie, or wicked temptress. I like what I'm hearing. What the hell is a gun mole? Oh god, it's a sexy rabbit hole. A gun mole? Mole like Molly? Or gangster's mole is the female companion of a male professional criminal. Origin, Yiddish. Mall is also used as a euphemism for a woman prostitute. We're learning, children! See how words lose all meaning if you just stop using them? So Warren said, "We are not a comic book. We are a magazine. Creepy is magazine-sized and will be sold on magazine racks, not comic book racks." And with that, Creepy, Eerie, and eventually Vampirella were born, each named after the host-like creature that would introduce and wrap up each of the stories appearing within. Side note, what is it with so many of these characters, though, looking the same? Like a copy of the EC Tales from the Crypt Keeper. Granted, there was the show one, but then you've got the other versions like John Carpenter and Body Bags, and the Creep from Creepshow. There may have even been other versions I don't know of. I guess that's just the nature of this type of genre. You need a disgusting creature that dwells and lives for these types of horrific stories. And only a monster could love puns as much as these guys. I appreciate that Warren tried to switch up the design a bit with the toad-like Eerie, and even more so with the sexy Vampirella. Man, door posters are the Maybe Crumb and Knox need a door poster. Maybe for their comic book, hopefully crowdfunding soon. Finally, Warren comic magazines frequently featured many comic book legends, including Alex Toth, a personal hero, Alex Raymond, another personal hero. What is it with Alex's? Wally Wood, Neil Adams, Dan Atkins, Reed Crandall, Johnny Craig, Steve Ditko, Frank Frazetta, and Bernie Wrightson. So we've got 145 issues of Creepy, 38 issues of the original Vampirella run, and a titanic mountain of comic grades. It's hard to know where to jump in. Another side note, I kind of hate it when other publishers take up a magazine. It sometimes makes finding clear answers on the internet to questions like, how many issues of Vampirella were there? An annoyance as you're given like 4 decades of issues from various companies. I digress. Thankfully, my good buddy Kevin gave me these 3 hardcovers as varying Christmas presents. And since he's in the news lately, what better place to start than with Steve Ditko, issue number 9 of Creepy Magazine, as he did work for both Eerie and Creepy, and the first story collected in this lovely hardcover. Written by the legendary Archie Goodwin. Seriously, that man was a machine. I see his name on more comics in a variety of genres than any other person. The foreword of the book mentions that he wrote for his artists and was beloved by many of them. So when he left Warren eventually, a lot of artists went with him.
Drag your beastly bottoms onto the nearest slab and stretch out. I'm set to go with some gear for you.
I have no idea what that means.
So follow the example set by the hero of this tale and just get into the spirit of the thing.
Our story begins on one of the hottest summer nights last year as a strange, shambling man-shaped silhouette stumbles up the stairs of an apartment building on West 17th Street, Manhattan. Wow. Specific. Oh, I guess he doesn't have a briefcase. Watch your tangents, kids. The night was hot and dry, but the man-shape leaves behind clumps of mud and wet dirt, climbing the stairs as neighbors come into the hall to yell about the racket he's making. At last, the form reaches the attic room, rented to a university student by the name of Michael Rogers, and begins banging and pounding on the door as it gives way to splinters. Soon, a scream rings out, and the sounds of a violent struggle ensue. As the sounds die down and the house is once again plunged into silence, the superintendent and neighbors timidly come to Michael's aid, and he warns them not to turn on the lights. They do their best to make him comfortable, and he tells them it's no use in getting a doctor. They question him about what happened, and Michael tells them the story.
Started with Professor Jerome at school.
Professor Jerome had needed volunteers for his paper on hypnotism, and Michael joined up. As he's coming out of their final session, Jerome tells him that he's never encountered anyone so responsive, and that's why he's using Michael for his most important experiment.
Long-range thought transfer through hypnotic trance. Your mind, your spirit will answer my call.
Funny how dangerously irresponsible that sounds. He tells Michael that time is short and the transference must be tonight, that he's already given Michael the post-hypnotic suggestion.
Suddenly, for the first time since aiding the professor in his studies, I felt afraid.
Now he feels afraid? But it's already too late. As the clock strikes midnight, the hypnotic suggestion takes hold and Michael crumples to the floor. His spirit comes loose from his body, and he describes never feeling so free before, able to look down on himself. Suddenly, he's moving through a strange half-world, heeding Professor Jerome's calls. A swirling universe of shadows and monsters. Soon, the professor comes into sight, and dread seizes Michael as he discovers the professor is dead from a heart attack. He races back through the nightmare world, back to his own body, back to discover his body is gone. Fleeing the room, he is horrified to discover himself, animated by the spirit of Professor Jerome.
I knew I was going to die. You can't blame me for grabbing at a healthy young body.
Actually, I think he's well within his rights to complain. Also, this guy knew down to the second when his heart attack was gonna hit. Amazing. Michael watches as Jerome walks away, screaming Jerome's name. He's pulled into a swirling vortex. Michael is assuredly doomed to wander forever in that half-world or become part of it, and he's there for an unknown amount of time before an idea seizes upon him. He knows of a body he can use. The peaceful silence of a lonely cemetery is shattered as Michael finds what he's looking for, the grave of Professor Jerome. I'll be honest with you, this idea immediately sprang to my mind when the initial event happened, and he would have been a heck of a lot less gooey if he had just listened to me. That would have been my first stop after that walked away with my body. Slowly, he crawls from the mud and slime, looking a lot like Solomon Grundy from Batman. Decaying, rotting, the shambling heap heads to the nearest clothing store and breaks the window wide open. Bursting into the attic room, Michael hurls the corpse thing at his former self, clawing, ripping, beating the body thief as the decaying mass falls apart with each successive blow. Finally, the pummeling has done its job, and Jerome's spirit pops free as he abandons its shell. Cut back to where we started, and Michael finally expires on the floor, and the neighbors question the validity of the story just as someone turns on the light. Horror! The gooey mass that once was Professor Jerome's body lies pooled on the floor at their feet, and they flee in terror as the superintendent questions what happened to Professor Jerome's soul. And you know that super's seen a lot of shit in his day. This can't be the worst thing he's come across in someone's apartment. In a swirling half-world of demons and shadows, Professor Jerome's spirit screams helplessly.
See what happened to Jerome? He was a guy who'd rather switch than fight. Now he's just a shadow of his former self. Oh well, on to my next tingling issue. That's the spirit.
That story was a lot of fun.
Our next devilish doozy comes from Vampirella number 2.
50 cents? What the f***? Vampy, as her friends call her, is actually a native of the planet Draculon, and has her own adventures through the magazines taking place between the stories she's relating. Man, I'll tell you. Pre-internet, World Wide Web, AOL,
You've got mail.
soap bubbles in comics were the bane of every young male interested in comics. And boobs. In this case, she's taking a shower of blood because on Draculon, water has the same makeup as the red goop. In that case, you'd have to say that these are blood bubbles, which coincidentally is the name of my 80s underground punk rock / metal band. Even still, strategically placed blood bubbles are the worst, and I don't know why this trope hung around for decades. I don't know, would you bathe in the blood though? That's kind of like showering in Mountain Dew, isn't it? Yeah, I guess you do drink water. Hey look, Forrest J. Ackerman. Anywho, again, it's hard to pick a story to do based on the fact that there's so many to choose from. I was going to do Death Boat, but it didn't feel Halloween-y enough. Or this one, but I could not abide by this sin against perspective. I love Vampy's jetpack, but what the hell is happening here? So I settled on an old house falling into the sea and one of my favorite creatures, the octopus. Oh god, blood bubbles. That looks like the same artwork.
No one goes to Grey Collar House anymore. They say that very soon the sea will eat away the cliff which supports the old place, and it will fall into the waters to be washed away. Someone might have been able to save the house, but that was before the coming of the octopus.
As ocean waves lap at the cliffside, Gary and Carl peer down into a well, discussing a large octopus that has taken up residence there.
Fantastic, Carl, old bean! I've never seen a species of that size before.
Yes, dear brother, I thought that you would be pleased.
I added the old bean. Carl says that he believes he's discovered the underground cavern that leads to the well, and that they could trace where the monsters come from. Gary tells Carl that the sea trek he's proposed will be expensive and inquires as to where he expects to get the money. Carl selflessly offers up part of Gary's inheritance to fund the expedition. To where? No clue. I thought the octopi were just outside in the well. Gary tells him the inheritance is for his kids, Rick and Susan, who need to go to bed now.
This place scares me, and so does Uncle Carl.
Gary tells him to take care of his sister, and he'll always watch over them both. Suddenly, we're in a cave, I guess the next day, with scuba equipment. Did they walk here? It's not like they had to rent a submarine or anything. How much could this have possibly cost? Cautiously, they swim the tunnel, always on alert that they could be attacked by the monsters at any moment. I've seen enough octopus documentaries by now to know that this probably isn't very likely. Suddenly, an octopus appears and Carl springs into action, stabbing Gary directly in the chest. Kinda missed. Carl's sibling sinks to the bottom of the ocean as he monologues internally about how it was he who imported the octopi in a plot to murder his brother and children for their inheritance. Knife wounds is going to be difficult to explain though. Probably should have let the monsters do it and claim it was an accident or something. I don't know, just off the top of my head. Back at the well, the children look for their father and uncle, but all they can see is the octopus, who is presumably trying to tell them all about the murder he just witnessed.
Holy f***, man, just came out of nowhere, stabbed him with a knife in the chest. I saw the whole thing. I'll f***ing testify.
The idea of an octopus that curses like a sailor amuses me. Susan exclaims, and Rick dives out of the way just as Carl lunges, missing the kid and falling headfirst into the waiting arms of the multi-limbed beast. Shouldn't it have been Rick yelling, "Look out, Susan," though, since the dad said, "Watch out for your sister"? It's a horror show as he's pulled under and the kids go back to the house to wait for their father. Later that night, the kids try to sleep as the tide comes in, bringing with it a strange new creature that looks suspiciously like the old one. Susan is on her feet as a slippery, wet blob squeezes under the door. The children are horrified as they're confronted by, and I'm quoting here,
"The monstrosity with the evil soul of their Uncle Carl." Don't try, pretty ones. There's no escape from me. I shall have my revenge. Ah, fuck!
one of the funniest looking things I've seen in a long time. A harpoon launches out and embeds itself in Carl's head, killing him for good this time. A silhouetted figure stands in the doorway. Pulling up the mask, Gary reiterates that he told him that he would always protect them. And God bless, what were there, piranhas in that cave too?
Tisk tisk. Some guys would rather lose a little face than get sucked into a fishy deal. Really now? From one angelfish to another, it's not worth crabbing about.
To be sure, these magazines were rife with camp and puns, and sometimes the payoff, as in the case in The Octopus, leaves the reader scratching their head a little. How the hell did the uncle get turned into the mustachioed human-octopus hybrid? In the case of the death boat story, how does a vampire turn itself into a boat and survive on the ocean, presumably in the scorching hot sun? And that's it. Become a charter subscriber today. I like that these books reprint the letter pages and some of the other stuff from the original magazines. What? $3 for 6 issues? That sounds like a crazy deal. What's that in like 1970s money? Or 1969 money? Insane. I really dig the Steve Ditko story a lot, and I like the Worlds Beneath Worlds angle. Anyway, I like this cover a lot, although the comic might leave you a little disappointed. Actually, it kind of looks like the Valerian and Loreline comics. Hey, possible future for next Jurassic June. So what have I learned that I can take away from these comics to apply to my own comic? Too much to list. The saying goes, if you want to be a writer, read. And if you want to make comics, read comics. What you have here in these hardcovers are a kind of masterclass in a variety of styles in art, layout, and storytelling in the comic book medium, and it grants you access to the giants of the industry of the day. You can study their inking, layout as I said, and even how Neil Adams handled pencils. Hey, who forgot to ink Neil Adams? And here I thought I wasn't going to have enough information to do a worthwhile review.
Well, that's all for now, kiddies. Come back soon for our next thrilling tale. Until then, have a very happy Halloween.
If you want to check out snippets from my own cartoony sci-fi comic series, Smacked in the Head the Animated Series, hopefully crowdfunding soon, there's a link in the description below. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.